Welcome to Proclaim. I've heard people say on occasion, if the Book of Mormon is true, then why doesn't the Bible make mention of it? Well, actually, it does. And that's what we're going to talk about on today's episode.
Proclaim the glory of the Lord, make known his mighty deeds.
If the Book of Mormon is true, then I think it's reasonable to assume that the Bible would make mention of it. And I believe that that's a really valid question, point. And so I would really like to address it because not only does the Bible mention the Book of Mormon, but it also explains why it's necessary. And we can find this in the 29th chapter of Isaiah. And just for people to understand, I am using the King James Version. Okay, so the beginning of this chapter starts off talking about Ariel, or Jerusalem. It's another term for Jerusalem. And it goes on to explain how the Lord is basically closing the eyes of the people so that they have no more vision, and that this vision would be sealed in a book. And he goes on to talk about how the people have turned their hearts from the Lord and that they teach the precepts of men. And because of this, God is promising through Isaiah that he is going to do a great work, a great and a marvelous work. And we believe that that great and marvelous work is the Book of Mormon. And Isaiah goes on to talk about that this book one day will come forth and it'll do a certain number of things, but it gives a point of reference. And this is really important when we talk about prophecy and revelation, is that God wants us to know when these things come to pass. So just for an example, if I were to tell you to go outside and go to the tree and then walk 100 paces from the tree, would you be able to find the spot that I want you to go to? Well, you probably see some flaws in this, and that is, there's two things in particular. One, you'd have to know what tree I'm talking about, and two, you'd have to know what direction I'm wanting you to go. Without those two things, you could be anywhere, and you could be way far away from the mark. And the same kind of concept is true when we're talking about prophecy. God wants us to understand when these things come to pass. And so he puts in here and there these references. And Isaiah did this. And he says that you will know that this book has come forth when Lebanon becomes a fruitful field. And it's important for us to clarify a little bit. When Isaiah says Lebanon, he's not talking about the current country. He's talking about a mountain range in Palestine. And he's saying that when this becomes a fruitful field, in that day, this book will come forth. Well, that should be somewhat easy to find because we can just look in history. And if we look at an old encyclopedia, Strong's encyclopedia, we can see that in the early 1800s, Palestine was basically a wasteland. 18 centuries of war and neglect had caused it to ruin. And by the early 1800s, there were almost zero Jewish families in Palestine, very few. However, by 1889, there were 50,000 Jews in Palestine, and another 60,000 plus would come in 1935, or by 1935. And so you can start to see that this area of land that Isaiah is talking about was not just being restored by Jews coming back to the land, but the land itself became fruitful again. And so if we take that in context with what Isaiah is telling us, we know that this has come to pass, and if this has come to pass, Lebanon becoming a fruitful field, then that must mean that this book has come to pass. And we believe that the Book of Mormon is that book. In fact, it's the only book that claims to be the book that Isaiah is talking about. And why would this even be necessary? Well, Isaiah explains a little bit further that because of this book and the words that are contained within it, that the meek will come to have joy, that the poor will rejoice in the Holy One of Israel, which to me implies that they would have to believe in the Holy One of Israel and even know who that is, and that it is Jesus Christ, that Christ is the Messiah. Isaiah talks about how those who have erred will come to understanding, and those who have murmured will learn doctrine. And if you look at Christianity as a whole today, you could see that this is really important and it is necessary. We have so many different denominations and so many different beliefs because we have different ways of interpreting the Bible. But when you look at the Book of Mormon, And we'll talk more about this in a future episode. It is very plain. And some of the things in Christianity that we argue about are made clear in the Book of Mormon. So in conclusion, we believe that the Book of Mormon fulfills the prophecy in Isaiah, that he foretold of a book that would come forth, and it would come forth in a day when Lebanon, that mountain range in Palestine, would become fruitful again. We know that that has happened. That must mean that the book must have come forth. Otherwise, Isaiah is not a true prophet. And we believe that he is a true prophet, and that that book, that great and marvelous work, is the Book of Mormon.